Can a joint Western military intervention truly stabilize global supply chains, or does it simply escalate the risk of consumer inflation back home? Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Commute Commentary, where we look past the narrative to cut through regional bias. Today, we are diving into the strategic implications of the new Anglo-French naval mission preparing to deploy alongside Oman.
Yeah, and I have to say, it is a massively complex situation on the water right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, to get a clear picture of what is actually happening, we really have to sift through just an overwhelming amount of noise, contradictory statements, and, heavy geopolitical maneuvering.
Right, which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at a massive stack of recent geopolitical reports, raw maritime traffic data, and defense analyses. We're doing all this to try and understand the actual physical and political reality of the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, we really need to understand what the logjam actually looks like today, how the Europeans are planning to break it, and how this brand new initiative is colliding with the agendas of both Washington and Tehran.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the physical reality, because before we can even begin to analyze, any military response or diplomatic summit, we really have to visualize the sheer scale of the blockage.
Exactly. The geography alone is staggering.
Right. I like to think of the Strait of Hormuz using this analogy. Imagine a high-stakes toll booth on a single-lane highway.
Okay, yeah.
But it is literally the only road leading out of a valley that produces 20% of the world's oil.
Wow. Yeah, 20%.
And right now, that entire highway is essentially just a giant parking lot.
It is. That's actually a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah.
You have this extreme geographical choke point. At its narrowest, the shipping lanes are only, 2 miles wide in either direction.
That's nothing.
No, it's a vital artery for global energy. And you're correct, it is completely stalled.
Right.
But to understand the mechanics of why nothing is moving, we have to look back at the cascade of events over the last few months,
Yeah, the 10-week U.S.-Israel war on Iran.
Exactly. That direct conflict led immediately to Iran taking the tactical step of blocking the strait to assert leverage.
Which prompted the U.S. response.
Right. The U.S. then retaliated by imposing its own naval blockade on Iranian ports. So you essentially had two massive military forces throwing up concrete barriers on that single-lane highway you just mentioned.
And the human cost of that standoff is it's staggering. And it often gets completely buried under the geopolitical jargon.
Oh, totally. It becomes just numbers on a page.
Exactly. Defense and maritime reports indicate there are currently over 20,000 merchant mariners trapped on hundreds of vessels inside the Persian Gulf right now.
20,000.
Yeah. We are talking about civilians. These are people just trying to do their jobs, maintain their ships, and, get home to their families.
Right.
But they're completely caught in the crossfire of a standoff they have absolutely no part in.
The psychological toll on those crews has to be immense. But recently, there has been a shift, at least on paper.
Right, the ceasefire.
Yeah, we're currently in the middle of a fragile 10-day ceasefire, which is a window that was deliberately timed to align with a broader truce in Lebanon. And during this specific window, if you listen to press briefings, both the U.S. and Iran have publicly stated that the strait is, quote-unquote, open.
Okay, I have to stop you there, because that is where the narrative just completely fractures from reality.
Oh, absolutely.
The politicians are standing at podiums saying the gates are open, but when you look at the actual maritime tracking data...
The AIS signals.
Exactly. The automatic identification system signals that broadcast exactly where commercial ships are moving in real time. There is a massive donut hole in the global shipping map.
It's striking to look at.
I'm looking at one of these heat maps right now. Normally, the Strait of Hormuz glows bright red and yellow, right? It looks like a bustling superhighway of trade flowing out to Asia, Europe, and the Americas.
And today?
Today, it is just empty black space, a complete void. The ships are terrified to move, regardless of what the politicians declare.
What's fascinating here is the severe disconnect between the political declarations of a ceasefire and the paralyzing, very rational fear that is currently gripping the commercial shipping industry.
Right.
A political declaration printed in a press release doesn't automatically make the water physically safe to navigate.
Because the physical threats haven't been removed, have they?
Not at all. Let's look at the maritime security briefs we gathered. They detail ongoing, highly asymmetric threats.
Yeah.
We're talking about reports of small, highly maneuverable, fast attack boats equipped with heavy machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades.
Just floating out there.
Right. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a merchant mariner sitting on a fully loaded liquefied natural gas carrier.
Oh, man.
An LNG carrier is essentially a massive pressurized floating bomb. If an RPG hits the wrong valve or, if the hull strikes a submerged sea mine, the result is just catastrophic. So for a commercial captain, the mere probability of that happening is an absolute deal breaker.
Let me build on that, because it isn't just the captains and crews who are looking at those odds, right? It's the massive financial syndicates backing them.
The insurance side of things.
Exactly. This brings up my favorite way to explain maritime logistics. Try buying fire insurance while your house is actively engulfed in flames.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. The major commercial insurance syndicates in London and globally have looked at those same security briefs, and they've made it abundantly clear they will not underwrite these voyages.
They just won't touch it.
Nope. They are refusing to issue war risk insurance premiums unless these commercial vessels are escorted by heavily armed military convoys.
Which changes everything.
It does, because without that insurance, commercial shipping simply ceases to exist. You cannot legally or financially move 20% of the global oil supply without comprehensive coverage.
Which serves as the perfect bridge to the next phase of this crisis. The commercial paralysis is absolute, and the economic shockwaves are already radiating outward.
Definitely.
So recognizing that diplomatic statements weren't enough to appease the insurance markets, European nations felt compelled to step in and try to, manually restart the flow of traffic.
Which leads us to Paris.
Exactly. This urgency is what directly triggered the recent highly publicized summit in Paris.
Right, let's dive into that summit, because we saw the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and France's President, Emmanuel Macron, effectively co-hosting a gathering of about 50 countries.
It was a massive turnout.
Yeah. We are talking about major economic to naval players like Germany, Italy, and others at the table. And the stated objective that emerged is the creation of a multinational military mission.
Now, the branding and the mandate of this mission are highly calculated.
How so?
While the organizers are going out of their way to label it as a strictly defensive operation.
Oh.
The operational mandate is heavily focused on protecting merchant vessels to provide that exact physical reassurance the commercial shipping operators and insurers are demanding.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and a massive component of this is conducting extensive mine clearance operations. However, and this is a big however again, there is a very prominent caveat attached to the entire plan.
Right, I saw this in the reports.
They have stated this military mission will only officially deploy into the strait after a lasting, permanent ceasefire is achieved.
Wait, that caveat makes no sense to me.
It's definitely confusing on the surface.
If they can only deploy after a lasting ceasefire is reached and everyone agrees to put their weapons down, isn't that putting the cart before the horse?
It does feel that way.
I mean, how does a post-ceasefire deployment help the 20,000 trapped mariners and the hundreds of ships that are stuck in the crosshairs right now?
Well, that is the exact logistical paradox military planners are wrestling with. The European strategy seems to be anchored in preparation.
Getting ready to go.
Right. They want the physical infrastructure of naval security sitting on the starting line, engines running, ready to enter the strait the very second a permanent diplomatic resolution is signed.
Okay, I see.
To achieve that, they are actively moving incredibly sophisticated assets into the theater right now. For example, the UK is forward deploying the destroyer HMS Dragon.
That's a serious piece of hardware.
It is. This isn't just a patrol boat. It is equipped with highly advanced air defense and radar systems capable of tracking and neutralizing multiple incoming threats simultaneously.
And France is matching that commitment by pre-positioning the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier alongside a dedicated fleet of escort frigates.
Yeah, that's a massive, unmistakable projection of naval power.
It really is. We are also seeing crucial regional cooperation materializing, right? Several reports indicate Oman has formally agreed to work with the UK and France to secure its own sovereign territorial waters.
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah, it provides a vital friendly staging ground.
Right.
And on top of that, you have nations like Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands vowing to provide specialized mine clearance support.
Honestly, the mine clearance aspect is arguably the most critical and time-consuming part of this mobilization.
Really? Why is that?
Well, modern naval mines aren't just those floating spiked balls you see in old movies anymore.
Right.
They are sophisticated weapons that sit on the seafloor, and wait for the specific acoustic signature of a massive oil tanker.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying.
Yeah, so clearing them requires deploying autonomous underwater drones to map the seabed and using specialized ships that are built out of fiberglass or wood to avoid triggering magnetic detonators.
Which sounds incredibly slow.
It is a slow, painstaking process. So the mobilization is substantial, but the underlying political motivations are heavily scrutinized.
Right. Let's talk about that scrutiny, because some international reports suggest Europe is launching this massive initiative specifically to demonstrate strategic independence from the U.S.
There's definitely chatter about that.
Yeah, these analyses point heavily to recent rhetoric, specifically President Trump calling NATO members cowards and publicly mocking the UK's military capabilities by claiming they don't even have a real navy anymore.
That is their specific perspective. We do not endorse or validate that stance, but it shows how polarized the conversation has become.
Absolutely.
But looking at the situation strictly through the lens of observable geopolitical movements, it is notable that Washington was completely absent from the Paris summit.
They weren't there at all.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that absence clearly signals a divergence in how the U.S. and Europe are approaching the actual mechanics of reopening the waterway.
And that divergence means this European coalition of the willing is sailing directly into a deeply complicated web of conflicting agendas.
Oh, a massive web.
They are colliding head-on with the competing maximalist interests of both Washington and Tehran. Let's look at the Iranian perspective first, based on the diplomatic cables and regional reporting we have gathered.
Right, so from the Iranian viewpoint, the arrival of a massive Western naval armada, regardless of whether it is branded as defensive or European, is viewed fundamentally as a hostile escalation.
Which isn't surprising.
No.
Yeah.
Iran's deputy foreign minister was incredibly explicit on this point. He issued a formal warning that any extra-regional warship deployment into the Persian Gulf will meet a decisive and immediate response.
That's a strong statement.
Very strong.
Yeah.
And Iran's underlying legal and historical argument is that only the coastal states, meaning themselves and their immediate neighbors across the Gulf, possess the sovereign right to secure and police the strait.
And they're backing up that rhetoric with very strict, very physical operational demands on the water.
Definitely.
Reports indicate that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, intends to physically board and vet all commercial ships attempting to pass through.
Yeah, boarding every single ship.
Their stated justification is that they need to prevent any covert weapons transfers from occurring under the guise of commercial shipping during this ceasefire window.
And that physical vetting process alone would create massive logistical delays. But the IRGC has also introduced sweeping economic demands.
This is the part that really stood out to me.
Yeah. They have indicated that while certain vessels belonging to nations with pre-existing diplomatic agreements with Tehran might be allowed to pass freely, all other international shipping could be subjected to transit tolls.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the method of collecting those tolls is causing widespread panic across the global shipping industry.
Oh, absolute panic.
Fleet operators are reporting that these proposed Iranian transit fees would need to be paid either in Chinese yuan or in cryptocurrency.
Which is wild.
Let's think about the sheer absurdity of that from an operational standpoint. I mean, imagine you are a ship's captain. You're sitting on a tanker in a highly militarized zone. Your satellite internet connection is likely spotty or actively being jammed. You have an IRGC fast attack craft idling off your bow, and your corporate office is trying to authenticate a multi-million-dollar Ethereum transfer or source Chinese currency to pay a toll just so you can turn your engines on.
It sounds like science fiction, but it's happening.
It is an administrative and compliance nightmare for these shipping companies, many of whom are terrified of violating existing international financial sanctions if they pay.
Yeah, it is a profound disruption. And demanding tolls in non-Western currencies or decentralized crypto represents a deliberate, strategic attempt to bypass the U.S. banking system entirely.
It's a huge shift.
It really is. It plays directly into broader, long-term geopolitical efforts toward de-dollarization of global energy markets.
Right.
Now, contrast that strategy directly with the U.S. perspective. The approach from Washington is entirely different.
Complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly. President Trump recently stated via social media that the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ships and ports remains in full, uncompromising force.
And what's their condition for lifting it?
The explicitly stated condition for lifting that blockade is that Washington's transaction or negotiation with Tehran must be, quote, 100% complete.
And adding another layer to the confusion, at the exact same time the Europeans were meeting in Paris, the U.S. State Department formally announced the creation of their own separate U.S.-led naval coalition designed to secure the waterway.
Two separate coalitions for the same strait.
Yeah. Though I should add, the French foreign minister immediately held a press conference to insist that the U.S. and European missions are, quote, complementary rather than competitive.
Well, when we strip away the diplomatic language and synthesize these viewpoints neutrally, we are looking at fundamentally incompatible strategic aims.
How so?
Washington's primary goal, demonstrated by the persistence of their blockade, is to exert maximum crushing economic pressure on the Iranian regime. The objective is to force a comprehensive diplomatic or transactional conclusion on U.S. terms before any pressure is relieved.
Okay, and Tehran's goal?
Tehran's goal, conversely, is to assert absolute sovereign control over their territorial waters, actively monitor all maritime traffic to ensure their own military security, and dictate the economic terms of transit to bypass Western financial systems.
So where does that leave the Europeans?
The European plan is essentially a desperate attempt to thread the needle between these two immovable maximalist positions simply to get the commercial cargo moving again.
Which naturally brings us to the ultimate reality check. I mean, it is easy to host summits in Paris and announce grand coalitions, but let's talk about the hard logistical reality of operating on the water.
The logistics are everything.
Does Europe actually possess the sheer naval capacity to unilaterally secure a hostile choke point like this without the overwhelming hard power of the U.S. military leading the charge?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at the historical precedents makes the current challenge very clear.
Let's go back in time a bit.
Yeah, let's go back to the 1980s. During the height of the Iran-Iraq War, the world faced a similar threat to oil tankers, and the U.S. launched Operation Earnest Will to protect them.
Right, I remember reading about that.
Back then, the U.S. Navy had a fleet of roughly 600 ships. They possessed the sheer numerical mass to simply surround commercial tankers with warships and forcefully escort them through the Gulf.
And today?
Fast forward to today, the U.S. Navy operates fewer than 300 ships.
Wow. That's half.
Half. And keep in mind, a 300-ship Navy doesn't not mean 300 ships are ready to sail tomorrow.
Good point.
At any given time, roughly a third are in dry dock for long-term maintenance, and another third are engaged in training cycles.
Leaving a very small fraction actually deployable.
Exactly. And those ships are currently stretched across the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. The pure mathematics of global naval power have changed dramatically.
So Europeans really have to step up.
Yes. That significant reduction in available U.S. naval volume makes European burden sharing not just a polite political talking point, but an absolute logistical necessity if you want to secure a transit lane thousands of miles long.
That math is sobering, but not everyone in the defense community is convinced the Europeans have the necessary hardware to fill that gap.
There's different pushback.
We reviewed analyses from several prominent defense think tanks, and they are highly skeptical of the European capacity. In fact, one particularly scathing report characterized the Anglo-French plan as a, quote, coalition of the impotent, and claiming depleted European navies are just playing at being relevant. That is their specific perspective. We do not endorse or validate that stance, but it shows how polarized the conversation has become.
Yeah, that phrasing certainly highlights the deep-seated skepticism surrounding long-term European naval readiness.
It's harsh.
It is, but to be fair, the operational challenges they're volunteered to take on are immense. We touched on the mine-clearing objective earlier.
Right.
We have seen credible naval reports suggesting that even with a massive multinational effort, it could take upward of 6 full months to comprehensively sweep the strait.
6 months.
Yeah. Now, strategically, you don't necessarily need to sweep the entire 21-mile width of the waterway from coast to coast to allow shipping to resume, right?
Okay, so what do you need?
You technically only need to secure and certify a narrow designated transit lane. But even establishing a single safe lane requires continuous sweeping, escorting ships single file, and coordinating complex drone operations, all of which takes a massive amount of time to deploy and execute safely.
And time is the one resource the global economy absolutely does not have right now, which is the perfect moment to step back and address you, the listener.
Yeah, let's bring it back home.
We have spent this deep dive talking about naval deployments, crypto tolls, and aircraft carriers in a strait thousands of miles away from where you are likely sitting right now. Why should you care?
You should care because the economic shockwaves of this geopolitical standoff are already hitting your wallet, and the impact is only going to accelerate.
It's true.
The modern global supply chain operates on a highly delicate, heavily optimized, just-in-time schedule.
Right, there's no backup plan.
Exactly. Factories don't hold massive inventories anymore. They rely on parts arriving exactly when they are needed. When 20% of the world's liquid natural gas and oil is suddenly removed from the market or severely delayed, the cascading impacts are immediate.
We're seeing it already.
We are already tracking reports of severe jet fuel shortages leading to canceled commercial flights across major hubs. We are seeing consumer inflation metrics spiking globally because the sheer cost to insure and transport everyday goods has skyrocketed.
So what does this all mean for the immediate future?
That's the million-dollar question.
Let's say a miracle happens, right? A perfect, permanent diplomatic peace is declared tomorrow, the blockades are lifted, and the tolls are scrapped. The supply chain won't just instantly heal itself.
Not at all.
The commercial ships are entirely out of position. That empty donut hole we talked about on the tracking maps means there will be weeks, if not months, of delayed arrivals.
It's a massive backlog.
Once they do start moving, they will hit destination ports all at the same time, causing massive congestion, overwhelming dock workers, and continuing to disrupt manufacturing schedules on a global scale.
Okay.
The damage to the timeline has already been done.
Precisely. The logistical backlog is immense, and untangling it will be a monumental task regardless of the political outcome.
Right.
Furthermore, this immediate crisis raises a much more critical, long-term question for global strategists. We are witnessing a fundamental failure of a critical global artery. Could this prolonged disruption permanently reshape how the world sources its energy?
That is a massive paradigm-shifting consideration.
It truly is.
Yeah.
We have to wonder if exposing this severe vulnerability will finally push major industrial nations to abandon their reliance on Middle Eastern oil routes entirely.
Which would change everything.
Could the sheer economic pain of this logjam accelerate the development of entirely alternative global trade networks? Or, trigger a massive, unprecedented investment in domestic green energy infrastructure?
A real possibility.
It is entirely possible that this crisis accelerates a shift away from fossil fuel choke points altogether, regardless of whether the US, the European coalition, or Iran ultimately dictates the flow of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz today.
And that wraps up our discussion for today. Browse our show for more global insights and subscribe so you don't miss the next shift. See you next time on the Commute Commentary.